What's up everyone, Michael aka Spirit Shard here with AIPD, Artificial Intelligence Police Department, a twin-stick score attack kind of arcade shooter, and it has co-op, which is actually really cool, and I actually got to try co-op. That was awesome. Anyways, we're going to go ahead and look at the options real quick because there's not many of them here. This does have controller support, so you got your vibration for your controller support, and then it also has left-hand mode, which is actually quite nice to see. They don't have this very often. Then they have sound effect and music slider, as you'd expect. Has a gamma control, or gamma correction. That's always nice to see as well. And then you have your windowed options. You got full screen, windowed max, and windowed. And then you also have a decent selection of resolutions, as you can see here. It supports quite a few different aspect ratios as well, which is quite nice. I don't know if there's more than these or if it goes higher. I'm sure it does. I think it just uses Unreal Engines for automatic resolution gathering. So that's probably how this is figured. But it has my resolution, so I'm good. And then you have your kind of like settings, your normal graphic settings. So you got VSync, anti-aliasing, texture, post-processing effect. One thing that would be nice is like, what kind of anti-aliasing is this and how much is it? Same thing with textures and post-processing and stuff like that. It would be nice to have more information or some tool tips. I just have everything on max because the game is not very heavy to run. So that's actually not too much of a problem. I run it quite well. And then you have your key bindings. Now it does have controller support as mentioned, so you can't rebind the controllers. So if I go ahead and exit out of here, it'll say how to play. Here's your gamepad controls. You can't rebind them, unfortunately, or at least not that I see. And then you get the rest of the tutorial stuff here. If you wanted to see any of that, you can just pause the video when I'm on there, you know, play a little game and try to get whatever page you want. Anyways, we're going to go ahead and click play. Now it is a score attack, so there's only one kind of map, and then you get different game types. So you got your standard mode, which is the one I'm going to show off here. And then you have some other stuff that makes it more difficult. And then you can also create your own. So you can end up adding these little effects that we'll actually see in game, and it'll add different multipliers and stuff like that. And I don't think the scoreboards are tied together. I think the scoreboards are tied together for these four, but I don't know if it's tied to this one. I don't know. It could be. I don't know. And then to have other players, I do want to mention that you actually have to have controllers for more than one player. And so when I was playing originally, I had my friend on the keyboard and mouse because of how we were playing, and then I was using a controller. I do recommend a controller for this game. However, I'm using a keyboard and mouse for this because I just do with my recording. It's just easier. Anyways, we could go ahead and standard, and I'm going to click medium difficulty. Now, the higher the score you get, the more enemies there are, the more points you'll earn. And I believe there's different leaderboards for each one. All right, so here's when you get to customize your little ship here before you go into the game. So you can select your different weapon. I'm going to go ahead and pick the Gatling just because it's kind of default, and then I'll switch over to something else. Now, you do unlock like newer ones as you go, and I've unlocked quite a few of them. I'm almost done. And as you can see down here in the bottom right, it actually says next unlock is almost there. It's almost full. So you do unlock them the more score you get. I played a decent amount, probably more than I needed to. And then you also unlock different ship types that give little kind of like bonuses. Like this one's called speed because it gives you extra flight speed. And then there's radiator, which decreases the cooling on your weapons. I like that one, so I'm going to use that one. And then obviously you have the all-rounder, which is your default one. And then you have the point defense. Yeah, there's different stuff. So let's go ahead and load in, and then we will see it. So if you've ever played a top-down kind of twin-stick shooter, this is going to look instantly kind of recognizable to you how it controls. It controls as you'd expect. So you use the mouse to kind of aim around, and then you use the WASD to kind of move around and dodge everything. Now, if you're using a gamepad, obviously it would be a twin-stick shooter. And then you use the different things. One thing I will say about the mouse control is that the mouse has a slight delay onto it because it uses a rendered mouse, and so it takes a second to actually get to where you're going. So that can be slightly annoying if you're going to play with the mouse and keyboard. That's why I recommend using a controller because it's instant. Now, we just cleared that one really quick because it was real quick. This is actually one of the more interesting mechanics in the game is every time you finish a wave, you select a challenge. And so one of these is going to be overdrive, makes drones faster, or I can have bad weather. I'll go ahead and do this one. And so it'll make EMP little things that'll go onto the map periodically as you play. So, what's the gameplay like? Well, you get your primary weapon, and so you go around and you shoot things, and then you also get little power-ups. Now, this is the EMP, so if I'm in that section, I can't actually fire, which is quite interesting. And there's a bunch of those effects, so, you know, there's quite a few. You can go... I don't think anybody's actually survived long enough to get all of the effects on one single playthrough, but it is possible. Now, along with that, you'll see these drops and stuff like that they've got. So you got these little tiny triangle things, I guess. I guess they're pyramids that you end up picking up, and it actually adds to your score multiplier. And up at the top, you can actually see it's a times thing. It reminds me very much of Geometry Wars. Now, they're also dropping little power-ups, and so I can use that. That's my secondary weapon that I picked up. So there's going to be blue pickups, and then there's also going to be green pickups. Now, one of them is going to be actually called a pickup. The other one's a secondary weapon. And the secondary weapon is going to be used on your right click or left trigger, I think. Don't quote me on that. And then also, there's also the pickup switch. You use space, and then it'll have different effects on it. Now, It doesn't tell you what they do when you pick them up, and so it can be slightly annoying when you first play, but after a while you kind of learn what they are. Like this one that I have down here, that's a shield, so I can just start running into things without taking damage for a second. Then this one's a cooldown, which means I can fire without having my weapon over here. Now you'll see on my character I'm playing terribly, and so on the left side of my character I have my health bar, which is going quite low. Now I don't know if there's actually a way to increase your health or anything like that after you've started, and so I think it's mostly going to be survival and try not to get owned. But I'm playing terribly because I'm just kind of showing off stuff. And I planned on switching weapons quite quickly. And then on the right side, you'll actually see my weapon heat. And so once that red bar fills up, one of the interesting mechanics is it'll actually drop a mine if I end up heating up. And then that mine will actually damage people around it. So it's kind of like dropping off the heat. And then you have a second to where you can't fire, which can be extremely deadly. Now that mine can actually hurt other players. And this is where I want to go into kind of the co-op element of it. One thing that I wish for solo players is that you could switch weapons on the fly, or maybe have two different weapons aside from the picked up side weapon. Because when you're playing multiplayer, you actually have, you know, two different weapons. You can use that for two different effects. Like let's say there's a giant mobs, there's a grenade weapon that would actually be quite useful for those mobs. But regardless, I've actually enjoyed it quite a bit. So you get your one weapon and you kind of go through as you go. When you get hit, you do lose multipliers as well, so you got to kind of go through. And as you're going, there's actually a decent amount of enemy variety as well. As in, the farther you go, you start getting bigger ships, more lasers, more of these big giant worm things, and it actually gets quite difficult, and they get quite fast. And as you add in, I kind of died on purpose there. Did totally. As you keep going, it actually gets more and more difficult. Now, I was actually on these leaderboards yesterday, but I'm not anymore, so whoops. Oh well, I lost that chance. I can throw up a screenshot if you want to see that. Yeah, I was on there. That's probably because of review key status, but whatever. And then we're going to go ahead and go back into standard. I'm going to go ahead on medium. Now, the game can get very difficult. I'm going to pick phaser because the weapons are actually quite interesting in this game, as in each one plays very, very differently. I'm going to go ahead and pick speed as well, so you can actually see how fast you can go in this game. So the game has a decent amount of variety to keep you going for quite a while. Now, visually, the game is also quite impressive as well. It runs on Unreal Engine 4, and this is the first Unreal Engine 4 game I've actually played that's been fully produced into a full game, which is quite exciting because I'm actually working with Unreal Engine 4, so it's cool to see what it does. And the game looks pretty. That was actually a time dilation, which actually slows down time. There's a lot of cool little pickups and stuff like that. There's not many of them, but there's a few. On the help pages, it actually shows what they all are, so you can actually learn what they do before you play, but I just learned it through playing because who looks at manuals these days? Yeah, visually, it's quite nice. One thing I would say about the visuals is that sometimes the visuals kind of get in the way when a camera shakes, because later on there's a lot of enemies, and as you're destroying a lot of stuff, it'll just kind of, you know, shake the screen a lot, because every time something blows up or every time you shoot something, every time you take damage, it shakes the screen. And I wish you could kind of turn that off, as in that kind of gets annoying, especially later on, to where you're just constantly firing, constantly using power-ups, and just constantly the screen is just everywhere, and it kind of gets nauseating. But aside from that, the sound effects are quite nice. There's a few glitches in the audio I've noticed, as in there's a time or two to where if I'm using a certain weapon and I kind of spam it too much, like let's say one of the secondary weapons I have right now, go ahead and go in here, it'll actually make some of the sound clip every once in a while. But aside from that, everything has looked fairly flawlessly. Like if I just spam this ability, it'll actually cause it to, there's not going to be enough enemies, but it targets onto all the enemies, kind of like my phaser that I'm using here, that it'll just kind of like make the sound act a little weird. Oh, my secondary's out now. Lame. So yeah, it sounds and looks quite nice. Now, one thing I will say is that the game doesn't have very much content, as in what you see here is pretty much what you're going to get. Aside from more enemy types and more weapons and stuff like that, you're pretty much limited to one stage, and I would have liked to see different types of stages. Like, I think it would have been really cool to see, like, oh, different arenas, like, oh, this one's a square or something like that, but instead it's all inside the circle, which from a score attack standpoint, that's fine, in my opinion. Like, it's not a very large game, though. So, going into my conclusion, very short video, it's a fairly nice game. Like, it's really, really fun. It's very, very fast-paced. It's got a decent variety, and as you go through, the added kind of chance element to where it's kind of random to what kind of challenges you'll get after the map. So it's like each time you go through, it's like, oh, well, this one will give me bad weather. This one will make it so that bombs appear on the map. There's one to where you actually have to go through and disable the bombs that show up, and they actually give you higher score multipliers and stuff like that too. So it's like, oh, I could get that one, which will make it more difficult, but it'll get me more score. So it gets really, really interesting because those different effects will actually add more multipliers, and you're trying to collect as many of these pyramid things as well. And the game's quite fun, and I've enjoyed it a lot. However, there's also not a lot of content, so if you're looking for a more story-centric experience, there really is no story. It's called Artificial Intelligence Police Department because you're going in and destroying viruses and stuff like that, so it's kind of like a visual representation of that, which I will tell you, it probably doesn't look this pretty, but that's what it is. So if you like this type of game, it is definitely something to look at, and it runs really, really well. Like, it's very, very fluid, and it feels really, really nice to play, aside from that slight mouse delay, which I've actually gotten used to it. And it kind of feels natural as well because you're in a ship, and so it's kind of got this weird slight delay to it, which I kind of expect from a ship. But at the same time, that is kind of annoying. But overall, yeah, it's a decent experience if you like these types of games, and it's a really fun thing that you'll play for like an hour or two, and it's one of the few of these types of games that can actually have multiplayer. And one of the things with the multiplayer is the multiplayer can become kind of this competitive thing. Like, your score doesn't combine, which some people will find that as an annoyance, but in the end, it does. But overall, like, you'll actually be like competing with your friend for like the score, so you'll be like trying to get all these points and stuff like that. But overall, it's going to be co-op, so there really is no like competitive element. And I feel like with co-op, with a good partner, you'd actually be able to get farther as long as you're not overheating your weapon and blowing your friend up with mines. So there's some interesting mechanics for that. But I feel like it's also just as good of an experience by yourself if you're looking for just a co-op experience. So yeah, that's kind of my conclusion. If you like this type of game and you think the visuals are awesome and you like the aesthetic and you don't feel that the camera shake will be too annoying, then this is a really solid entry into this genre. It doesn't have a lot of content. I wish it had more content, but overall, it's really fun. Anyways, this has been Michael, aka Spirit Shard, with AIPD, Artificial Intelligence Police Force. It's pretty awesome. I like it. So I like 2 and 6 shooters. Anyways, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one and stuff like that. And leave in the comments how much I'm just not very good while recording on this. I did get in the leaderboards. I'll throw up that screenshot. I did it earlier, but I'm gonna do it again. I was really happy. It made me proud. I can actually get on the leaderboards of this game. Yeah, not a lot of people have this game quite yet. So yeah, unfortunately. But yeah, so that's kind of it. Also, before we go, while we have this up, I'm gonna go ahead and surrender real quick. I'll go ahead and do one final thing on here. You can also organize the leaderboards if you're looking for your friends stuff. But over here, all these this is going to make it so the transporters are more upgraded. These ones are going to be like, so the environment dangers are all present and stuff like that. And then the design one, those effects that you saw in between the games, in between the waves, I mean, these are actually what those are. So you'll end up toggling these like, oh, let's play with bad weather on and stuff like that. And then you can actually play it. And I'll be like, save it, and you can save it to one of your 3 slots. Anyways, yeah, so like I said, this has been Michael, aka Spirit Shard, with AIPD, Artificial Police Department. It's pretty fun. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Leave comments as well, because I like comments. They make me feel special.